all. I'm Rania Francoeur, and today's session will be about as part of our functional leadership series. Today's focus is on business leadership for CMOs, our chief marketing officers. What are the pressing issues for CMOs? What makes an impact in their current role, on their career planning? Let's get into it. So, our usual format is we start off with some opening remarks from our CEO, Randall Craig, and then we flip into questions from you, from me, and see. And as usual, Randall has no idea what questions are coming his way. He's totally blind and in the hot seat. I'll start off with a little bit about Randall. He has founded several successful startups. He's held a long time position at a Big Four consulting firm. He was a senior executive at an American public company. He's the author of 8 books in the Speaker Hall of Fame, a master facilitator. He's helped over 100 organizations scale, and he works with me at the Brain Trust Professional Institute, helping organizations grow and scale and align through leadership retreats, executive offsites, and executive coaching. So, Randall, where do you want to start today talking about the life of the CMO?
I I think the life of the CMO has changed dramatically over the last number of years. At one point it was a very simple thing. Let's be the interface effectively with the agency, and now they need to effectively be almost full-time technologists. They've got to be very, very connected in with what's going on through the sales channel. It's very much a numbers games. They almost have to have a CFO hat at the same time. I don't know if there's any particular corner of an organization, well, maybe procurement, I don't know, or supply chain, but most modern CMOs have got to wear so many different hats, and the job has changed quite dramatically over the years. In a certain sense, it's very exciting because you get to do new stuff, you get to explore new things. On the other hand, it's a bit challenging, certainly from a personal perspective. You want to grow in your career, but it's sometimes hard, particularly when an organization has got, when the economy is a bit sideways, where there's incredible pressure on the CMO to actually produce. On the other hand, it's hard to keep your head above water. Do you do more of the same? Do you do something different? What if the internal dynamic isn't one that's conducive to you doing everything that you really want or need to do? And so the job of the CMO is actually very challenging. And one of the reasons why I was so excited, Rania, about this particular topic is it gives us an opportunity to explore that and answer any questions that people actually have.
I will start with the first question to get us started, but if anything is top of mind for you, feel free to, we're informal here, put your hand up or just come on mic or put it in the chat. I can read it aloud to the group if you prefer that. I will start. Okay, Randall, every culture has the target of their jabs and their jokes and their jests. So in social circles you have the blonde jokes, or in family dynamics you have the youngest child, the middle child. In Canada, I grew up with Newfie jokes. I haven't heard any of my kids do that. In the corporate world, it's the marketers that get all the jabs, all the jokes that the marketers, they don't work as hard as everybody else. We know that's not true. Like, why do you think that perception still exists? Is it deserved?
I well, one CMO of a global company that I was tightly connected with. He said 2 words. So to get all that out of the way, and I said, "What are those 2 words?" He says, "Blame me. If sales aren't picking up, blame me. If what the agency is doing not working, blame me. Gee, if we chose the wrong technology, blame me. If etc." And now that we've got that out of the way, now let's roll up the sleeves and actually start solving the problem. And I think one of the differences between those who are successful and those who aren't is the question of how proactive you are. I think in the olden days, and I don't want to spend all of our time talking about the olden days, the CMO role was a little bit more passive. And I think nowadays it's got to be a lot more proactive. You just can't help it, right? There's just so much going on. And I think that is kind of where that came from. And the CMOs I know, they don't hold by that. If somebody ever started doing those kinds of like friendly jabs, etc., they'd fight back. They could jab back just as strongly, right? But I also say that sometimes some CMOs know what they know, but they don't know what they don't know, and therefore they feel like they just don't have fully a hand on. They don't know what all the buttons actually are, and they might not know that there's some buttons that don't. They might not even realize that there's some buttons and levers that exist, right? And if only they knew that, they'd probably figure out how to use them, right? And And it's very hard not to feel almost overwhelmed when, in fact, you do know the organization, you do know the services, products, you do know the market, right? And you don't want to you want to make sure as a CMO that you I don't want to use the word ignorance, maybe naivete on some of these things are not sort of fodder for what you're just saying, Rania. I think it's a fascinating one, right? And I don't think I've met anybody who's reached a CMO level who's an idiot. Okay, every single one of them truly, truly understands what needs to be done, right? They don't have enough time. They don't know the right questions. Okay, they've got infrastructure or a management team that isn't fully aligned, that's preventing them from sort of getting their ideas adopted. But those are the kinds of things that are problems that have been solved before many times. Ronnie, I'm thinking about one of the leadership retreats that we did for an international agency, and the number of ahas in the room were fascinating, right? So, good question.
Well, a light start. So this is again coming to the end of this functional leadership series. We did one on CFOs and CTOs, etc. And when I was thinking about, the session and the questions and the perceptions that we have, and how do any of us have an idea of what these other roles are if we've never held those roles, even if we work with them, I think about, pop culture like TV shows, whether they're scripted or, sort of documentary, where we learn so much about other industries, whether it's all these CSI shows and how detective investigations happen, or all the legal shows or all the medical shows. To my knowledge, there is not one that sheds a light into the world of marketers. If there is one, you can let me know. But like, is there sort of like anything you can speak to or share in terms of this like marketing department subculture, or what do people need to know when working with marketers? What are they really up against?
So I think it'd be a wonderful, I think it'd be a wonderful drama. Okay, but it would be a very hard one to produce. And here's why. Um, every single organization serves a different market. Okay, has got a different strategy. It's got a different history. There's different people. There's different external partners. There's a different internal culture. Every single one of these things is different, right? So if I were to say, okay, what is the prototypical CMO? Okay, and how would you describe that? I think that the TV writers and producers would have a very hard time, other than making it a bit of the person almost a satirical sort of kind of thing, because the roles are just so different. They're responsible for brand. Okay, they're responsible for the sales machine. For some of them, they're responsible for customer service. For some of them, they're responsible for product or service development. For some of them, thank you very much. Their budget for technology is as big or bigger than the regular IT folks, right? So they've like there's so many different things that different CMOs are responsible for, right? And so you're right. The idea of what does one do, okay, is for the general public is a very hard one. But I'll tell you one of the things that you can do, which is actually help your peers as a CMO understand actually what you do. Okay, and in a certain sense, that's more important than you could imagine, just because there's so many hooks from that CMO role into other parts of the organization, no matter what the structure is, or the strategy, or the history, or the people. What's the relationship, for example, between the CMO and the CTO or CIO, right? Both are highly interested in the data. Okay. In some organizations, the CTO, CIO says, well, I'm the guy for plumbing. That's it. And the CMO is one that says, you know something, I've got this idea about using marketing automation and AI and data, blah, 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 blah. In other organizations, the CTO, CIO are ones that say, here's a whole bunch of things that are really now possible. And the CMO, on the other hand, says, you know something, let's focus on that one over there. And then maybe it gets done here, maybe it gets done there. It's done outside, etc. But the dynamic. So the question and the challenge I would put to most CMOs is, what wiring are you doing in terms of using the skills of your peers at the C level? Okay. And what are you doing to make sure that, yeah, you've got a seat at the table, but that they understand the decisions that they're making through a marketing lens as well? And when those conversations start to happen, all of a sudden it becomes a lot easier to say, okay, well, the general public might not know what a CMO generally does and where the challenges are and where the support is necessary. Internally within the organization, everybody's on the same page. Why? Because of that investment in the relationships and the way you're running joint projects, or where one is the client and the other is the server of the, like, that kind of interaction is highly, highly possible. When we do retreats, obviously we do this for the leadership team as a whole, but the one-on-one work, and I'm not talking about let's build some basic relationships by going out for a meal or playing golf or whatever it is that you do. I'm talking about professionally understanding how, for the organization as a whole to be successful, okay, it's very much a partnership between the CMO and those responsibilities and every other one, right? Every other one. For example, if an organization operationally has got the service development or product development off the side, yet on the other hand, the CMO within the CMO's organization is the one that collects intelligence as to what's going on, whether it's competitive intelligence or whether it's from existing clients, customers, or referral sources, etc. How does that get flown in to the person responsible for that service or product development if it's not the CMO? Right? That is something that is really, really important. It's not a question of saying, well, let's just eat lunch and become friends. It's a question of saying, how do we make sure that the functions are wired together so that 1 + 1 really does equal 3? I could also say the same thing with respect to, excuse me, with respect to any other function within the organization, right? A simple one, okay, but you might not think about it. Recruitment. Many organizations, do a fair amount, and the HR groups do a lot of work on recruitment. Well, what does the CMO have to do with that? There's an entire function that deals with recruiting and HR and everything. However, on the website, there's a careers page, right? That's not just a matter of technology. That affects the brand of the organization in the marketplace. It has an impact on the culture of the people you are bringing into the organization, right? It sort of helps people understand, the HR people who have these interactions with these recruiters or with individual candidates, etc., as to what the brand and the culture of the organization actually are all about. And then when they actually join the organization, move into that role, wouldn't it be nice if they actually did understand a lot more about what that brand and what that sort of marketing lens, if you will, actually is, right? Because if you just left the recruitment website exclusively to HR as opposed to having that marketing input, that would be difficult. In some organizations, the HR group also is responsible for internal communications. Well, internal communication is very important. Most people recognize that, but internal communications impacts the culture, which usually the HR group is responsible for. But internal culture and external brand are intricately connected. How so? Well, you can't be strong on the outside if you're not strong on the inside. And isn't there a connection there to be made? I can go through any other department within the organization. This is totally within the control of the CMO or members of their team, right? And that's something that we can make a difference on.
Randall, someone recently, this sentence flew into by me. Someone said, um, they said that they see a distinction between two types of CMOs. There's the CMO in charge of execution, which they described as effectively, a creative resource and a project manager, and the CMO who's an executive. Does this resonate with you, or do you see this like pejorative, or would you like divide? I mean, there's so many ways an organization can choose to use their CMO's time, but what do you think about that distinction?
So, Rania, it's actually a very good point. I would slice it more this way as opposed to this way, and you know, it's kind of funny. If you've got a four-person organization, one person is the CEO, one person is the COO, one person is the CMO, right? And you know what? So that everybody is rolling up everybody, even the CEO is rolling up their sleeves and getting stuff done, right? Now that's the extreme, okay? a 20, 30 person organization, the CMO's job is going to be different than a 500 or 5,000 person organization. Their budgets are bigger. The scope of responsibilities is different. The geographies might be different. The number of business units that they've got to work through is different. The number of people in their department, if you want to call it that, is different. Okay, what they choose to outsource versus insource, like all these things, and therefore the CMO who's an executive has got to make those decisions in a way that's different than the resource-strapped startup, smaller organization, right? And between point A and point B, there's a huge amount of growth that has to happen. And I think sometimes, we can train people up to that next level of competence, solve the you don't know what you don't know problem, right? But at a certain point, that lead marketer's job suddenly changes from one who's primarily doing execution, as you say, to one who's senior leader, and their job is leadership. It just happens to be that their hat says marketing, right? And they may have a lot of functional experts underneath who are managing various different marketing functions. Might have a number of external partners, a digital agency, a print agency, whatever it is, doing things as well, right? And so the question is, when an organization starts to move from one point to the other, is that CMO, is that marketing leader that you've got, how do you sort of upskill them to that next level? Or maybe they're not built for that next level, in which case, how do you find a role for them that actually does make sense, right? And if we flip that around, actually, and I know I'm sort of going down a different path, but if you flip that around, if you've got a CMO who works perfectly in the, call it the 50 to $100 million range, okay, and then all of a sudden it's a $300 million company, or somebody who works in a 10-person company and all of a sudden it's a 100-person, what do you do as an individual CMO in terms of actually saying, how do I move my career to that next level if I'm built for a particular size or a particular type of role? And I think that's fascinating, which you're probably wondering, okay, so what is the career path that they might take? It may very well be that they could be the CMO of one division. It could very well be that they don't want to be a CMO, but maybe they want to be a CEO. Maybe what they can be is they can be a CEO of a super small division or a startup mode of that now larger organization. Yeah, they could leave the organization, but they lose a lot of industry and internal and connective knowledge as well. But there's multiple paths if you find yourself as a CMO realizing that, I'm built for this size. Okay, how do I sort of get the next one? You can upskill yourself. Okay, whether it's with coaching, whether it's with professional development, or if your organization's investing in decent leadership retreats, that those are the things will upskill you and everything. But we want to make sure that the right people at the right skill level are doing the work, right? And frankly, enjoying doing the work, right? Hence the built for it question.
If you talk to anyone doing hiring, they have their skills matrices, and obviously there's the skills and the brain that you need for your senior CMO role, and all the way down, to through in your marketing department. In theory, we don't need, we don't need our arms and legs at the bottom to have the brilliant strategy mind, and vice versa. You need different skills, different seats. People would say, well, you're overpaying your CMO to do the execution. But my question is, like, is it really true that it's so easy to find cheap options to do the execution? The execution is also important.
The I don't know if the word is cheaper, okay? It's really more a question of where the value is. So, for example, if you bring on an intermediate marketer to do a lot of the execution as you're growing sort of that CMO role, right? For them, it would be a challenge. And yes, they may cost less than you, okay? But what do you do with your so-called extra time if you're not, quote, doing all the work yourself? And part of it is, okay, so part of that time needs to be mentorship and managing and that kind of thing. The person or people that you're hiring to do it, or frankly, the organization you're outsourcing it to. But part of it is, okay, so now you're at this next level of capability. How else are you going to spend your time, right? What are the truly intuitive leaps and truly creative ideas that you can come up with as a CMO that are going to move the organization not just incrementally, okay, but a little bit more strategically up the next level. And let me give you an example. Okay. Many organizations will have an agency and the agency does a lot of the writing for them, right? It should be no surprise to anybody that um, properly prompted, AI can do a lot of that. So agencies on one hand will say, well, perhaps we can use AI in order to be a lot more efficient for the client and thereby protecting our margins. So, gee, we can give a little bit of a discount, perhaps to be more competitive because there's AI involved. But really, our margins will go up because the AI is the best thing in the sliced bread. The CMO is buzzing along with this relationship. Things are going quite well. The copy that the agency is putting out is just fine. Might even be slightly better and everything. But the CMO who's thinking a little bit more strategically is saying, one second here, why can't we just do that writing internally with ChatGPT and then use the agency for some editing function, or frankly bring the editing inside and we don't need to pay an outside agency at all, and therefore we capture all of it in here at far less cost, far less cost because we're using this interesting and disruptive technology, right? So if the CMO doesn't have time to have those kinds of thinking through what might be possible, why? Because they're executing. Well, guess what? When they do have that time, they should be thinking of things like this. By the way, I'm not suggesting that organizations disintermediate great agencies because there's some other reasons why. External perspective, a better sense of what's in the market, et cetera, that you might want to still do business with the agency. But if there's going to be a huge productivity swing, okay, it certainly means there needs to be a conversation, right? And that's something that a CMO should be doing, right? Certainly if they've got more time. Same thing with data, right? How are you using data strategically, right, within the organization? What needs to be done to wire it better together? How do you build better client value, right? Using that data, right? These are things that take some time to think through, right? And that's what's actually part of what's really exciting is all this change means that there's all this opportunity, whatever the size of the organization. So let me talk about AI for a moment because I think that's something that yeah, all CMOs are acutely aware of, and probably what I would say, I was thinking about this just earlier today. Don't ask me why, but I remember way back in the day when desktop publishing and the Macintosh just came about, and you saw all kinds of people produce kinds of things with a million different types of fonts and oh, it came out of a laser printer rather than a typesetter, and it was. I think right now we are kind of in the early desktop publishing phase of AI. AI is moving incredibly fast in terms of adoption of a technology and everything, but I think we're just really getting started. And yeah, the idea of a CMO of being I don't want to say a chief AI officer, that's so totally not it, but the idea of having full understanding of what AI is all about. What I'd say is that the idea of using AI as an incremental tool to improve efficiency is something that's very good. Okay, in terms of short term, let's see what we can do to slice here and make this faster, etc. But the true impact of AI will be the strategic shifts and the transformation, the disruption. Okay, and the best CMOs should be at the forefront of that part of AI, not just the let's improve workflow, right? Or let's see about, do better editing. Okay. And I think there's just a huge opportunity here. And if I could just keep on about AI. The CMOs, need to also look at AI risk from another perspective as well. Um, you're working with an agency, you're working with a consulting firm, you're working with outside partners. Are they using your data for their own AI training? Is there something in your contracts that mean that don't allow them to use your data for their training? Okay, I don't know if people are really talking about that. I certainly haven't heard that myself, but it seems like something that should be. Okay, there's a lot of talk about employee acceptable use policies. The Brain Trust, we've got a template for our clients on that one as well. But that's employees. But how about partners? Okay, and the idea of we don't like OpenAI or Anthropic or Google or whoever using our data for their own training purposes without our permission or anything. I think we need to think that same way about the partners, the CMOs that we actually engage with. So I don't know. I think that there's a great opportunity here, but and we can't ignore it, but I also think that we should go into it with our eyes open.
I'll take the rain baton back, or whatever it's called, the rain stick. I'm going to ask my next question.
Shoot.
Back to the CMO and their role and contribution within an organization, and that's C-suite. Okay, it's more or less understood and understandable, that the right-hand man or gal for the CEO is often the COO, sometimes it's the CFO. But we don't often hear the CEO say the CMO is my number one. Like we share an office. Meanwhile, the CMO job description has never been more similar to the CEO just job description. They both have to be thinking, of a 360, all the metrics, all the pieces to add value to the business. And yet the research tells us that CEOs only 50% use their CMOs as part of their setting their business strategy. Like, do you have any commentary on the CEO CMO relationship, or is it a chicken and egg situation where it comes back to what we talked about, which is like, are you the strategist or the executionist?
Yeah, I think that's part of it, Rania. I also think if I could throw another little, spanner in the works is the rise of a different C-level executive, the chief revenue officer. Way back in the day, it was a lot easier to say, okay, marketing's in charge of getting leads, and sales is in charge of actually converting those leads to sales. And this is the responsibility here, and this is responsibility here. In some organizations, the chief revenue officer has got responsibility for, particularly with startup scale-ups, has got responsibility for both, right?
Mhm.
And once it grows to a certain part, very often the CRO becomes more focused on sales, and the CMO comes to be responsible for marketing and everything. So I think it's a function really of the organization size and complexity more than anything else. For startups, scale-ups, oftentimes financing is the number one thing. We're going to do another raise. Okay, so guess what? It's the CEO and the CFO who are going to be doing the pitch, and often members of the board doing the pitch for more money. Okay, and the CEO knows if there's not money coming in, they're gonna shut the doors at some point. Not good. Okay, and that's one of the reasons why CFOs for public companies, CFOs are the ones that do the public statements. It's a whole regulatory part of it, etc. I'm not saying this isn't why CMOs shouldn't be doing, but I'm just saying from a practical perspective, sometimes these things get in the way of a very, very tight relationship. And I think the strongest CMOs are ones that are able to help build the trust and the knowledge with the CEO to, to, to to sort of make that truly into a strategic role as opposed to being one that seems to be second fiddle. Because, yeah, you can get money from the financing activities, but the best money that comes in is the net profit, the net contribution to profit, the based on sales, right? And that's where marketing is pretty core. I think in research-oriented organizations, one that have got a lot of IP, excuse me, the connection between the CMO and whoever is doing the product development is also very, very important. Usually it'll come, shouldn't say usually. Sometimes it's under the CTO, sometimes it's under the CMO. But unless there's very, very tight communication and connection between those two roles, right? Um, I'll go back to something that I said earlier, which is this. If we think about who's on the team, really. And we look at the C level, the most senior people, that's team one, right? And when they're all on the same page, it becomes an awful lot easier for the organization to move forward. Why? Because it's toned from the top. If the CMO says, hey, we're going to be working with the IT folks about such and such, right? Or with the HR folks on communications or recruiting, et cetera. And this is why it's important. Everybody will take that direction and things will happen at lower levels within the organization, right? And so if that team one is actually functioning as a team, magic can happen. And if not, it becomes a lot of bilateral kind of things where, there isn't that synergy that really should happen. CMO is probably one of the most, I would say it's one of the most important roles, just because it's that glue between so many parts of the organization.
Okay, I'm gonna take that and run with it.
Yeah.
It's glue, they should be one mind, they're in sync, they're working together. Randall, sometimes we see huge organizations where the CEO also is CMO, right? We're not talking about small startups where there's a million senior level titles and you get a senior letter and you get a whole bunch of senior level
Yeah.
titles. Okay. If is this advisable? Is this ideal? If the CEO brain should be the CMO brain, is that or do we need some church and state separation? On that note, we're going to break here this part one on business leadership for CMOs. We'll pick up with more insights and Q&A in part two. But if anything we've talked about so far resonates with you, do reach out. We'd be happy to talk to you about how we can help your organization through your next leadership retreat, executive offsite, business growth coaching, conversations to align your team, board development. You can email us at info@randallcraig.com or call or book a call at www.randallcraig.net/30 and see you back for part two.